It's volume.
Okay, how's that? Is that a better sound?
Yes, go.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, good morning.
You are audible. You are audible.
Okay.
Yeah, Nayak bro, YouTube live stream has been started.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So hi everyone. Very good evening to all of you. I'm really sorry for the late, but so many of our friends had joined because of this 7 minutes late. So we are glad for that. And so, as we all aware that this May month is a global digital accessibility awareness day we celebrate across the globe. So, on that occasion, we planned this webinar or talk to have a guest to talk on this particular accessibility issue. So, for that, my friend from United States, he joined with us this evening, and hope he'll be giving his thoughts and views, and he'll be interacting with you at the end. So when it comes to Dr. Fuller, Mr. Fuller is a visionary entrepreneur. His innovation in virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So he has been a blind since his 20s. He was a member of representative House of member in the United States, and he worked with different organizations in the different portfolios like audio video production, management, and entrepreneur. He's a serial entrepreneur for past 20 years, and he is now at 66 67 if I'm not wrong. So you don't feel like that. So he's 67 years old, and still he's young and energetic. He always wants to interact with the people like us to share his thoughts, and he always asks like, if I have a kids like you, so we'll rock the world. He lives in that line, and he has been doing a great work. I don't want to take that much time and share all of that. I just would like to hear all that from Mr. Fuller's uh, view and from him. So further note you, before I turn on the microphone to the Fuller, we have some ground rules. So guys, we are not going to allow you to mute yourself, first reason. So we don't have concerns about that. And one thing is, don't raise hands unnecessarily, because it makes noise. Since most of the people are visually impaired, the screen reader fades out, and we may miss the speaker's speech. So don't raise your hands unnecessarily. And apart from that, don't make noise, and be joined with your audio. So most of the people are joining without audio. Be concerned about that. And so don't worry. If you left from a Zoom, we are streaming it on a YouTube. Just go and watch over there. Though you don't have option to interact one-to-one, but you can comment over there. We'll take up your comments on from YouTube. So these are the ground rules we fix for this webinars. So further note you, I over to the Fuller to have speak on this day. Yeah, Mr. Fuller.
Well, I say good evening from the morning on the other side of the world here, the Sonoran Desert of Tucson, Arizona, next to the Sonoran state of Mexico. And I am honored to be here and to address such a wonderful group. I started in my life as an artist, a painter, a visual artist. As a child, people loved my work, and I was given art shows in prestigious museum galleries, and I was admitted to the university as one of the youngest people because of my art talent. And so my dreams, my beliefs, my future seemed to be art. And I pursued that to the point where I was given the opportunity to study abroad in Europe, and I did. I studied in Europe fine art and learned commercial, graphic design, illustration, and animation in Europe. When I returned to the United States, I began my career working as a graphic designer. And at that point, I was also discovering limits to my ability to perceive color. And color is a very important part of any visual artist's work, particularly in the styles and the work I did. And at that point, my parents arranged for me to speak with the ophthalmologist, the specialist in eye disorders. And at that point, I was informed that I had a form of progressive blindness that would eventually claim my vision. They informed me at the time I was about 18. They said, you'll probably be totally blind by the time you're 21. To me, that was the most extraordinary, horrific, unbelievably bad news. I couldn't believe it. And the only thought I had in my head at the time about blindness or vision impairment came from an old 1950s movie of a singing, dancing little girl encountering a blind man who was sitting on a sidewalk with a sign on his neck saying blind and selling pencils. And I remembered thinking out loud to myself, my goodness, I've studied art my entire life at that point, and now it turns out all I'll be good for is selling pencils on a street corner. That was it. And I always tell everyone ever since that I wasn't always what we call a rocket scientist about disability and blindness. I didn't know much of anything. And from that point forward, I was despondent for some time, but I went back to school to study other fields, to find other talents within me. Didn't know that I had particularly any, certainly not developed to the point where my graphic and art design skill had gone. But I determined that I would make the best of whatever talent I did have, what I could do with the rest of my life. And along the way, I took a personal inventory. I said, you don't get to vote on this. There's no democracy here. Fate has determined that you shall be a blind person, and you can't do anything about that, apparently. What can you do with that? And I remembered saying to myself, well, perhaps there's some wisdom in it. If I pay attention and I'm open to the possibility, perhaps I'll learn something from it that will make me wise, and perhaps yet I'll be a great artist. And so with that in mind, being 19, I think at the time I said, I don't believe it. And I said, it doesn't matter, you don't believe it. Go ahead and pretend like it's true and work with that. You'll have the rest of your life to make a decision about these things. And so here I am before you today saying, I embrace the truth of my reality as a blind person, as a person with a disability. And now that I am 67 years old, my hearing is fading just ever so much. I have physical challenges. Sometimes my body doesn't work the way I would remember it should work. And so it's part of life, embracing change. And I think that's the most powerful wisdom that came from my experience so far. And as a designer, as a creative person, as a person with a creative bent, a desire to be a creator, I started looking at what I could do. And I'd worked in television. I became skilled in all the craft of television. After all, running a TV camera doesn't require a great deal of vision. In the early days, you could kind of get, television was blurry also. It was very poor at the time in the 70s and 60s. And so I became a television cameraman and then a technical director. I kept finding myself working behind the equipment because I liked to work with technical things, and it made me feel important. And ever since I was a little boy, I thought it was a really cool job. And then as my eyesight became poor enough to where I had to make a serious consideration of what can you do when you can't see well enough to do these things. And that was when I decided perhaps I had to become, and this is a terrible word for an artist, I think, an executive. I had to find a way to become a management person and use those skills and I told myself, perhaps there's something creative to be done as a producer. And I said, okay, let's try it. And so over the years, I started working in television. I was a science reporter. I then started producing music videos. I loved documentary art, film, because telling stories is open-ended. You don't know what the outcome is until you're quite a ways down from filming. And so my working with filming technology put me in close contact with the current state of the art, as we say, in technology. And my brother, who was an astrophysicist, a man who studies the stars, an astronomer and a designer of telescopes, he was 4 years younger than me. He also had the same eye problem I had. We both had it. It wasn't particularly inherited. It came from another source. I'll speak of that some other time. I don't want to confuse people, but we both were losing our eyesight. He was 4 years younger. My attitude about it was, see what you can do. My brother's attitude was, this is going to ruin my life. And my brother pursued that all of his life. He was very well brilliant, and he designed radio telescopes. He designed, he invented video over the internet, video over IP. He was the first with broad patents in that area. And he worked for major tech companies, and he made them very lot of money. And he lived well, but he would never leave his office except to go home to his office, and never out in public, and spoke often of suicide, my brother, because he couldn't, he told me, face the stigma of disability. Well, I said to him, you're a weird astronomer anyway. Everyone knows you guys are weird. You know, why do you care what people think about you if you have a disability? And he wouldn't use a white cane. He wouldn't adapt. I was very sad to say that it ultimately claimed his life. I miss him to this very day. It's hard for me to even talk about it. So when I began losing my eyesight, I decided that there was something to be done about disability. It was the 1960s at the time, late 60s. And there were social movements that people were organizing and striking out for their rights. People with disabilities were stigmatized, still are to this very day in our country, even, and everywhere in the world. It is often the case. People with disabilities are very marginalized. And to me, that seemed, as a designer, something perhaps I could do something about. And so I got involved in the movement called the Disability Rights Movement. To this very day, I've been working hard with filming stories of people with disabilities. We've collected in the United States over 1,500 interviews with leaders of the US disability rights and what is called the independent living movement. Independent living is where you're able on your own, using available resources, to have a normal life, to be part of society, to have a job, to work, to transport. If we design things better, then we don't have, quote unquote, disability. Disability only occurs when a society fails to provide accommodation. I always refer to these things in a technical way because I've worked a lot with technology. And I say it like this: it's the basic specifications for human beings. I tell that to engineers and business people. Specifications: a baby, an aging person at the end of life. That's the specification, not young men who are athletes, young men and women. No, it's really about all of us. And if you're a good designer, you're really interested in hitting the spec. You know, when you're designing and engineering a product, you've got to hit the spec. So accessibility is about that for me. It's about specifications, and it's about human experience. I myself have long ago realized that human beings have enormous potential. Never ever think people have no capacities. The humblest among us can teach us wonderful things. They have gifts to share, as I like to say. So I've been involved for many years. I started in like the late 70s, thinking about how to augment human vision, because I was losing my eyesight. My brother and I, we decided to use digital television, which was a new idea in 1970. It was a brand new idea coming out of the gate. And we began using these techniques because the city where we live, Tucson, is a world astronomy, space science capital. We had a lot of engineers and scientists working with these things. They were friends of my brother, and we began using technology, as I like to say it, in an artist sense, my palette of colors. I paint with technology. I look at how to render a solution using a technological means. And in the age we live in today, my palette or toolkit includes artificial intelligence, how we might use those for new kinds of digital agency to enhance, to extend our abilities, not replace any lost abilities, but really to work around, which is what we people with disabilities tend to do, work around the problems. And we're very good at that. We're problem solvers. So are our families. Truth is, when one ever thinks of the number of people with disabilities, which is about 1 in 5 in any society, sometimes more in some, 1 in 5 people, you have to also include our families and friends. And so that's at least 2 other people. So truth is, when you run the numbers, it's about half of everyone. And in that respect, and referring to my tribal identity, my Native American indigenous roots, it's about the natural cycle of life, you know, how we live, how we care for each other, how we support each other. That is part of the experience of life. Who would deny their babies and children and elders? Why would you do this? I mean, how is it that you fail to understand the needs of people as they go through life's cycle? So I've been working on these ideas, these technologies for a very long time. I've been now 45 years as a disability advocate, working behind the scenes in policy. I even ran for the House of Representatives here in my home state of Arizona, which was indeed a challenge, and it taught me one important thing, and that is I'd rather own people like that than to be one, I'll be honest with you. It was not a fun thing to do, but it taught me a good lesson in life, and that was to appreciate how difficult a job that was, and to do everything I can to help provide information, knowledge, skill, stories. In fact, we're filming stories so that policymakers, those in power, would better understand we're talking about their family, their children, their grandparents, and them. And into every human life, some challenge may occur. Here's one for you. In the United States, with the pandemic, we've lost over 500,000 people. 35% of those were people who were aged or disabled living in care facilities, long-term care facilities, quite a lot of them. 35% of the dead, which is way more than 1 in 5. And as a result, coming into this post-pandemic world, we hope, someday, soon, we hope, we have to be aware that the entire world has now been touched by the challenge of perhaps instant death, disability, a lifelong disability. It's made us all more aware of the space around us, where we live and the people around us, and where our food comes from, where the supplies are derived from. We've all gained a great deal of insight as a planet of human beings about how very close we all are to having our lives change totally. And so I believe this is the best time ever for us as society wants to reconsider how to build back and better. How can we as a society do more, design better, build better, so that we're not excluded by bad design? And so I share this with you as a designer, and I'd love to talk tech with you guys and hear more about what you all are looking at and wanting to achieve, and learn from you. But I do want to be sure to give you all that I can about the work that I've been doing. I worked in consumer electronics, having designed and built head-mounted displays and micro cameras. I transitioned myself into what is called virtual reality technology as an innovator and designer. As I got to that, I became aware of the people working in virtual reality. This was about 1995, and we all became acquainted with each other. And I was one of the few people that had a rather holistic perspective. Everyone works on a little piece of something. Some people, it was the software, the code. Other people worked on the physical hardware. Other people tried to solve problems that the hardware and the software were creating. And I sort of looked at them all and tried to gather from that what could be done. How could we make something useful and worthwhile? And so in my home city at the time of Palo Alto, California, which is the city kind of capital of Silicon Valley in California, I began working with the cable television company on their board of directors. And that was a gift I found from the skills I'd learned in accommodating my disability and being open to the challenge that policy presents and hoping to change the attitudes of policymakers. It gave me a lot of skills in governance and how to communicate with government, how to communicate with people in different ways. And my skills as an artist were very much a wonderful thing. And so just as my eyesight was fading from me, and it took many more years than the doctors originally thought, but along the way, I had the experience, which I'd promised myself when I was young, that it would be like having a lifelong laboratory experience where I would learn what vision really means and how it works, and I would take away from that something profound. And so indeed, in designing head-mounted displays for virtual reality, I came to realize the software, the hardware wasn't really doing very well at that time. 1995 was a very long time ago. And at that point, I created and as they say, took public, I made it a publicly traded company, a 3D movie and television company. So I got involved in making 3D movies and television. I built the technologies for it. I found relationships with consumer electronics companies and motion picture equipment companies. And we began making 3D movies and opened even a theater to do 3D movies. So I've as a blind person, I'm the guy behind some of the 3D movie technology, the virtual reality, head-mounted display, the augmented reality technologies. And now I'm going to talk to you about what I work on today. And it's called augmented reality. Augmented reality is where we have glasses or headsets, and it's not just, it doesn't exclude people who are blind. No, it doesn't exclude people who are deaf. It is what I call the envelope of functionality, the window in which a person is able to perceive the knowledge and information about the world around them. It's a matter of personalization, isn't it? Some of us are auditory people that listen very carefully. Others are people that are highly visual and analyze everything visually. Deaf people are a perfect example of people who have become so adept at visual information and communications that they have amazing gifts. And so when you consider this envelope of functionality of every human being, personalization is what we need to facilitate. And today, as we move into this world called augmented reality, we're looking very soon in the next couple of years of having very inexpensive glasses that'll integrate with tiny cameras and depth sensing equipment. It's very much the same things that are in the modern smartphones today. And these technologies will make possible a whole new potential for people as they move about in the world, in a spatial, geospatial world. You'll be able to encounter the information. It's like instead of browsing on your desktop, typing in, searching for vision impairment India and looking for a group, instead of doing that, perhaps you'll be in India or you'll be looking at a picture or something will trigger an interest. You'll see an article written by one of our friends. And at that point, the glasses will give you the links to those things that are relevant. So you will be able to choose. So in other words, when you're walking down the street, and this was my idea now 20 years, wouldn't it be great if the grid of addresses that you pass would identify themselves to you? And then you'd be able to ask further information if you're interested. Or let's say you're looking for a specific shop to buy a cooking pot. And as you're going about your business, you'll get a little flag in the corner of your field of vision, or you'll get a little cue in your hearing, or you'll get a tap on your wrist or some other means by which we communicate that there is a business nearby that has the product you're looking for, just as an example. Another example, you are in the store making a purchase, and your camera, your system picks up the product that you're looking at, and it warns you that it is a product that's mislabeled, or the product has something in it that you are allergic to, or that it doesn't match what you're looking for. And you'll be able at that point to make an informed decision. You'll be able to make a decision based on the product. Today, many different blind technologies exist, and also for people with disabilities that level the playing field quite a bit. You're able to use barcode scanners now to read a barcode on a product and do the very same thing. But very soon, the cameras will be able to pick up the shape, the look, the logo, the name, and will do it on their own pretty much. And likewise, you'll be in touch with the cashier as you're making a retail purchase. It'll come up in your system, and there'll be an annotation, and you'll say, please put that one back, not going to buy it. And so that's the kind of practical side of it. When we think of the COVID-19 and how it's changed life for so many of us, it would have been really great if we had within our communities, such as people with disabilities, blind people, people with mobility challenges, or people who are deaf, a community connection, so that within our communities where we live, which is where we do most of our business and commerce and connections, our relationships are there. We're shaped by the places where we find ourselves living. Wouldn't it be great if within those places you were no longer isolated and disconnected from each other, but given the ability to gather again towards the ideas, the needs, the community resources, and make those available? So I call this communitarian. It's a real word in English, communitarian. It means the desire to, or the ability, or the social integration of community as an important part of your life. And it puts it ahead a little bit of being an individual, which is one of the problems in society. When people are selfish or self-centered or self-interested, they can ignore the needs of other people. Communitarian means that you're engaged with the community. The community is the first most important thing. And if you think of it, of course it is. That's where the food comes from, and transportation, energy, so many things are connected to community. And so wouldn't it be better if we had a better way of connecting to our community and to each other, and to share the knowledge and resources we need? One of those areas I've identified for people with disabilities is the built environment, as they call it, built environment. That is to say, buildings, architecture, streets, our communities. The built environment is a great challenge to us when we're blind, when we have mobility challenges, when we have cognitive impairments. So many ways we can be disconnected from our environment around us by just not being able to read the signs, or not knowing where the accessible ramps or lifts could be found. And so wouldn't it be great if, as you approach the community, as you move around, you become connected to these resources. They become apparent to you. And then you can adjust your route, your plan, your day, and make the most of the resources you have. Many of my friends who are wheelchairs users only have about 4 hours at most on a battery charge. So when, as we all know, using these smartphones, it's such a difficult thing to keep them charged sometimes, to find the electricity in time without the battery going flat. Imagine if that is how your mobility is connected. So the ability to plan your day, your route, to keep track of your energy needs and uses, and to integrate that with your daily routine. And I believe that is where we're going with what is called augmented reality. And there's a development in that area called the spatial web. That's the idea of how space, geospatial environments can be made into the web, as I've been mentioning, so that you encounter the knowledge and information you need when and where you need it in the form you need it in. And that's real accessibility. When we can get that done, the world becomes open to us and we become, shall we say, normalized in the sense that we're just like everyone else. We have access to that knowledge, that information. We can comport and adjust our day and keep us going and busy without having to depend on other people. We can be independent, we can be self-reliant. And today, the mobile web that we've all been enjoying with these inexpensive smartphones or expensive smartphones, as the case may be, have given us new opportunities to open doors and to give us new possibilities for engaging with the world around us. I would like to see that improve. There's ways to do it in a communitarian way because all of these little devices have radios in them and they connect together. They can actually weave a web, a tapestry, a new social fabric, as I like to call it, linking us in better ways. And we're looking forward to that. Even people who are so marginalized, they're not able to have the internet connection, can actually use these devices to pass messages between each other using the wireless radios that are built into them today. And so those are the technologies I'm working with now. There's a company which Kealoha here, my partner, she'll put this in the system and it's called plan-systems.org. It's a nonprofit I'm a member of. And it's developing spatial web augmented reality on a communitarian, shared, and distributed basis. In other words, unlike the web, which has a centralized server, and then we're clients connecting to it, we see how we've all been exploited, used badly by these people who take all of that knowledge and information about our lives and our whereabouts, and they use it to push messages commercially at us, to sell that information about our lives to people who are interested, whoever they are. That doesn't need to be this way. We can use community-based infrastructure with Plan Systems, the organization we're entering into the chat window. And you can follow up, and anyone, I welcome you all to be in touch and to ask questions, and anything I can do to help, I'll be glad to do. Venki and I are good connections, and we'd love to help in that way. And so I don't want to keep talking without hearing a little something back from you all, but that kind of covers a lot of my work. I've learned how to be a business person in the work I've been doing over these last 45 years. I've been very successful at business in limited ways. I haven't been about making money. That's not my first priority in life. It's been more to be of service, to find a better way to assist people so that people like my brother, my precious, beloved, dear brother, so that no one ever feels again like they don't have value because they have a disability. I can't allow that. And so I work hard to change that. And that's my good work. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I'm so delighted to be your friend and an advisor and connection. So much love. Namaste. And so please ask your questions. Let's share some knowledge together.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fuller. We plan, like, we want to have a live interaction with you where I ask people to unmute if they have a questions, and they'll directly hit your question. They are not going to put messages in the chat.
Okay.
They are allowed to put their messages in the chat, but we are opening for them to interact in that way. So hi guys. So if you are not comfortable in texting, just raise your hands. I'll allow you to unmute yourself and you can interact with Mr. Fuller. One second.
I'll just quickly say that I really believe the best is yet ahead for all of us. The world is catching up to us. It's a really
yeah,
big.
Sandeep Sandy's raised hand. Yeah, Sandeep, just unmute yourself.
Venkat, am I audible?
Yes, you are, please.
Hello, sir. Very nice to be in this session, and I have learned many things from you, sir. So thank you so much for the wonderful session. My doubt is sir, are we having any musical technology which is accessible for visually impaired?
It's a really good question. I have many friends who are artists, musicians. I consider myself yet one of those members of that community, although I have to say I'm a bit of a technologist these days. But yes, the fellows that are Planned Systems, the organization I shared with you, they have been very interested in this challenge also. And my very good friend with an organization called MUSM, M-U-S-M, isn't that how, yeah, MUSM?
Yeah, double check.
I'll put another link in, and we are working, we've created a company called Touch.ai, and Touch AI is a company that's very interested in music, integration, and collaborative play in that area. The company is also focused on how, and here's what we did. We said, in the year 2500, what could people be doing differently than we do today? And let's see if we can work backwards and figure it out. And we came up with our humanity, our bodies, our physical design gives us the place to start. And we humans, we have sensory feelings, we have these different aspects of our humanity. And what we'd like to do is focus in on those. And so we came up with ideas of how we move our fingers, how we direct our gaze, things like this, that are just the normative aspects of all humanity, the things that we can do variously. Some people can't, but others can. And then we find ways to work with whatever human mechanisms that are working for you, whatever systems you want to rely on, and try to come up with ways to make those more effective in giving you the reach. And so we really do believe that that today we can start thinking about, for the time ahead, how best to facilitate human creativity, communications, and music. And you asked a really good question. If you'll share with me your email, I will get you some answers to musical tools that people that are blind and visually impaired. A good many of my friends are, and musicians, and they work with mixing and sound. They're coders, and they develop products. I want to say this to everyone, you know, there's no limit to our human potential. As I always explain, human beings are the most flexible and adaptable animals on our planet. That's right. We can do anything. We're extremophiles, as they say. We can live underwater, we can live in space, we can live in the Arctic Circle, we can live in the deserts of this world. And so that ability to adapt and change, which is exemplified in those of us with disabilities, are a real testament to our human potential. And so I always like to talk not about disability, but about human potential, because we all have it and we can all tap that. And I'm going to get you some information on that. I'll share more through Vinky and you, anyone that contacts me about a musical.
Yeah, thank you, Fuller. I'll connect. I'll get the Sandeep's mail address and I'll share it with you.
Sir, one question.
Please.
As you said, your friends are working with mastering and mixing, and so
Yes.
could you just speak out about the tools? And one more thing, we have MacBook MacBooks, right? And Mac OS is totally accessible for us, for VIs. And there are some musical softwares called Logic Pro and Cubase, etc., which are for composing, creating the tune and composing and mastering and mixing. Are those softwares are accessible for Mac OS or not?
Well, that's a really good question. You know, I myself don't, I'm the producer guy, so I'm an executive in charge. Usually there are other people I work with that are doing these things. But you asked a really good question, and we all work with Apple equipment ourselves. That's mostly what we use, the MacBook.
Because everyone are having different perspectives. If we are approaching someone, they'll be producing out in a different manner. So if we want to produce our creativity out with our own tools, so will it be completely possible, or we need to depend on any other guy or any other person for simple things like mastering and etc.?
I think not. I think we can do it all ourselves, every bit of it. Even the graphic design is possible. And what I'd like to do is get you very specific answers to your questions. And I can do that best by asking my friends who will also have access to this recording to listen and give a good response. And so I would like to just answer that question.
Please, we'll connect with Sandeep to your fellow friends and your teammates.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Oh,
gonna
absolutely.
help. And I request Mrs. Fuller to note these points if you could.
Okay. Also, we're looking for, I was told by some of these people, we're looking for Java programmers. So if anybody here is a Java coder.
Yes, we have a Java coder.
Very good.
Further note, you will take some other person. Yeah, we have a Bulbul. So Bulbul, I'm giving you access to unmute yourself and unmute and talk to the speaker.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. I'm Bulbul from India. I'm very glad to hear you, sir. You are so great. And I believe we learn many things from you. And I have a genuine question. Just like people suffering from poverty in India don't have laptops or smartphones to use. So how they can connect to accessibility?
The company I mentioned, plansystems.org, that machinery there is to be distributed free to the world. It's in development right now. We're working on it and we're still a few months away, but it's free and it'll be given to the world. It's like what they call Linux, the operating system Linux. Instead of having iOS as you have on a MacBook or Windows on a PC, instead, this is a network operating system. And so it'll go on anything from a game console to any kind of smartphone, to any kind of PC or any kind of Apple device. Any of these things can now be connected through a network operating system. Now, different than your phone's operating system or your game controller or any of these things, the network operating system has the utility such as word processing, spreadsheets, video editing, video conferencing. It's all built into your devices. They come with this stuff already built in. What we do today is use a browser, and then we go to the web and we get it from the web through a central server, and then it comes to us. The way the Plan Systems works, it's a blockchain. It's a community-based blockchain. And so it's passing around in your village amongst the people on their devices, sharing that archive of knowledge in that community. So it's what I call a communitarian network it gives us the ability to network together, to share knowledge and information and resources in new ways. And so there's no limit to how well we can connect with people in the community. You may not have all the most advanced capabilities on a very humble, say, game controller or something, but nonetheless, you can connect. And with that, you could find out where the resources could be found in your community, when the resources might be available, who in the community is there to assist, to help, what the schedules are, things that are so important to us. Today, all of that is available through the internet, which is great, you know, that the world can connect to itself through the internet. But what about our community? Wouldn't you think that the greater richness of our connection, our experience in life, which is our community, shouldn't it also be the place where we connect more regularly, more usefully than to say the entire world? And I'm finding that increasingly true when I use a Google search or any kind of search engine. I'm given, I don't even know, 3-4 pages of ads someone paid to stick in front of me before I get to the knowledge I was trying to find. And so today, that's how it works. We use a browser, we connect not to a lot of different sources, but to one of 5, whether it's Facebook or Google or this or that. They plug us together with those things through their auspices. So you're not really searching the internet, you're searching Google, you're searching Facebook, and you're connecting to Facebook, you're connecting to Google. And so we're bypassing that, not eliminating it. You can still go there anytime you like, but we're giving another system, which will be what we call the grassroots level, down where we all live, to each other, to connect and share the knowledge and information and communications with each other that could be so essential. I was part of a group that I work with now 15 years called World Enabled. Kealoha, we'll put that in the search bar there, World Enabled, where I work as the co-director of their Inclusive Cities Lab with my dear and beloved friend, Dr. Victor Pineda, who's member of the United Nations International Convention on Human Rights for People with Disabilities. He was one of the drafters, and he works with UN Habitat, UNESCO. And what we did is we did a survey around the world. We connected 140 countries to ask the question, how is the COVID-19 experience for those of us in the community of people with disabilities? And what we learned is that the COVID-19 is very dangerous, but our governments are perhaps even worse because they know nothing about us. They don't know we exist. They don't include us in their planning, their policies. The first responders, the medical emergency people around the world have no training or experience often. So we really came to realize that we need to be self-reliant. We need to count on our community and where we live with each other to pull together and to share with policymakers and those who are in decision hierarchies above us to understand our needs more effectively. And to do that, we have to reach to them. They're not reaching to us. And so that's kind of how it is. And so out of necessity, we see the need for a communitarian development around the world of communities so we can connect together in our communities, take advantage of the relationships there, of the proximities there, and to make it work. And so the answer to your question is the bar for entry into the world of assistive technology using digital devices and networks can be lowered considerably to the point where all of us can be engaged. They speak of it as a digital divide, those of us who are not on the side of having a lot of resources to apply to computational machinery, to networks, to pay all of the money for those things. There are many, many of us in the world. As I like to say, again, the specification on humanity is that we come in a range of societies, of opportunity, And what we want to do is find a way to reach across that digital divide and give new tools that are better able to serve everyone. And so that's what we've been doing. The men who created this company, I refer you to plansystems.org, and the women, these lovely people started in military service, and they worked with military technology. And they saw how military got things done and how they have to keep what they call command and control and to share logistics more effectively, even if the internet isn't there. And that's the design that they came up with. Even when the internet goes down or isn't available, you're still able to connect together in your community and share knowledge and information privately and securely. That's the other thing. We don't want to be exploited. We don't want to give away our information for nothing. You know, it is true that there's knowledge and value in our information, but the information could be better. The way that Google and Facebook and all these companies work is they're kind of paying close attention to everything you do, and they then analyze it in the hope that they can guess what they could sell you next, or where you might go, or what they might do to influence you, which is a rather not a cool, not a good thing. On the other hand, what if we had a trust relationship with our network and we were willing to share anonymously our intentions? So if I'm heading to the shopping district and I'm looking for, let's say, a fishing knife for my uncle for his birthday, because he's a fisherman, wouldn't it be great if I got a little flag up saying, hey, there's a shop near you that has the knife? And instead of everybody in the world for the next 3 weeks, you know, as if you searched on this in Google, fishing knife, you'd be getting that information thrown at you for weeks and months and who knows years. You'll never be done with it. They're always trying to figure out, is he ready for another fishing knife? So it'd be better, more valuable, if we actually were willing to participate, and then we could be compensated for that. Instead of giving that money to Google or Facebook, we say, I'm willing to tell you what kind of car I might be interested in, but I don't want you to target me with that unless I permit it. And if you do permit it, you should be the one compensated, not Google or Facebook. And so that's the system we've designed, one that's more in keeping with modern network capacities. It's in keeping with our concept, our principle, which is everyone should have an opportunity to be part of the evolution of humanity, where we're able to extend ourselves, our basic humanity, plus the knowledge and information of the world in which we live, equals a better life for everyone. So that's our hope, is to make it so that it works for everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fuller, and thank you, Bernd. We'll help you out. If you need any assistance, you can reach us out in given numbers and channels. So we have a Surya Narayana with us. So Surya Narayana, I'm giving access to unmute yourself. Just unmute and talk with the speaker.
Okay, well, let's start with augmented reality. It's a word that means like virtual reality, which you've probably heard of. Someone is able to facilitate vision and hearing and motion to create an experience in virtual reality, a fully computer synthesized world. Augmented reality doesn't seek to immerse you that way, to take you completely away, but to rather give you a view through the glasses onto the real world around you. Or again, if you're not a vision person, in your hearing, we don't want to interfere in your hearing as a blind person, certainly, but we do want to be able to give you cues to get you information, the kind you're looking for when and where you need it. So in designing things that are not quote unquote immersive, where your ears are covered, your eyes are covered, augmented reality seeks to give you the perspective of the world around you and then augment or enhance or add to, that's what augmented means, to add to that knowledge you get looking down the street, to the grids of addresses, maybe to whisper in your ear, you're in the 700 block. The address you're looking for should be about 58 meters ahead, something like this, to give you the ability to guide yourself, to be able to range right into a doorway, which really hard for me. 20 years ago, I realized someday I'll be completely blind, which I am now. And wouldn't it be better if you could find, the men's room, hey, or the emergency exit or the cash register at the store. Very challenging. But with this kind of technology, you can have precision ability to guide yourself. So that's one of the questions I got. What is augmented reality? That's what it is. It's the ability to use technological means to enhance or extend your human perception, whatever mechanism you would prefer, your personal preferences. And I'll just add, this is where what is called artificial intelligence comes in. Today, AI is being built into every modern high-end, that is expensive cell phone. They have what is called neural morphic chips that are able to process in a very high rate of data parallel, that is multiple channels, very rapidly. That has given rise to the development of what is called neural networks, which are essentially like our own human and animal nervous systems, the way neurons pass signals and the way knowledge and information is processed. These things mimic that, not nearly as perfectly as we biological organisms at this point, but quite well. They process this information in a linear, simple, parallel processing way, and they're able to have similar pattern matching as a human or as with machines, essentially. So that's how the AI comes into it. And all of us, no matter what, our patterns are understandable. We'd prefer not to have them known by Google or Facebook, thank you very much, for reasons I've stated, but we wouldn't mind having them in our pocket, able to help us. And so I submit to you that the advances in electronics today indicate the cost of such gadgetronics will be very reduced very quickly in the years ahead. And it's good for us to plan ahead that way, to think ahead, to know that these tools are coming, and to think about how we can use them more effectively to enhance our lives. And as I've said, we people with disabilities, we're problem solvers. Most people just put up with the very difficult challenge of using browsers and searching and navigating commerce on our PCs, our Macs, our platforms we use. Those are challenging things to do. In the very near future, and this is the work of our company, Touch.ai, we'll have essentially like an autonomous finger, if you will, so that it'll run the thing for you. Every time you go to a particular website, you use it much the same way, the same challenges, always the same. How do I get something into a shopping cart? How do I insert the search? Where does the search go? What do I have to do? I struggle all the time with that as a vision impaired person. I have to listen to things on the screen and sort my way, feel my way through it. In the future, the little AI in your chip in your pocket will be able to do a lot of that for you, and will help profile it in a way that you personalize it and need it to be done. So that's the exciting thing of emerging new technology, is it can enhance our human potential. Again, back to that. The best thing about us is our human potential, not our limitations, not our challenges. Was there another question?
Yes.
Okay, yes, the word communitarian. Somebody asked about communitarian networks.
Can join the communitarian network.
We're going to put together an Instagram account for communitarian networking, and we're going to begin to promote that idea. It is the idea of how we can work together collectively, collaboratively in our communities towards community benefit. It's something people overlook. They're just in a hurry to make millions of dollars off of the web and new ideas. And actually, there's a real disservice that has been caused by that rush to make money off of the internet. We went from a place where it was designed originally to share the gifts of humanity globally so that no one would have a barrier and everyone could access that knowledge. But it was taken over quickly by big commercial interests that found a way to make it easy for us to put our personal information up there and share it with each other. And they, of course, were in the loop and watching the whole time. And so it's become what it's become. Saying nothing much against that, because it is what it is. The good news is that we can develop together a better way of doing things in the old style of the original internet and its bright promise for humanity, that we could be linked together as a global community. But I think first and foremost, it's important for us to get to the resources, to the community around us, to the people in our circle, and to facilitate a better way of extending our hand to each other in our communities, in our circles, amongst our peers. That is of really utmost importance. And it's been largely forgotten by the internet unless someone can figure out a way to make a lot of money on it. So we're looking to give it away. That's what we want to do. Was there another question?
Any magnifiers or
Any
glasses
magnifiers?
you used to prefer?
That's how I got started in this business of thinking out of the box, as they say, thinking differently about how we engage with information. In the 1970s and after, they had low vision technologies. They were cameras, CCTV cameras, they called them, cameras with big lenses and a big display monitor. And you could zoom in on a piece of information on a paper. They're still used today, of course. They've become much less expensive. They used to be many thousands of dollars. And so when I first began working as a consumer electronics executive, I worked in Japan and in the US. As my eyesight was failing, I'd find myself on airplane trips that would last 12 or more hours. And how could I read a magazine, a book? I'm vision impaired. I have to have a magnifier to do it. And so that was where I started thinking of how to design glasses that I could wear using the technology people were pioneering at the time in the early 90s for virtual reality. And I got involved in that because I'd been working in consumer electronics. I saw that you could get viewfinders for camcorders and perhaps put those into some glasses. And then I found a new kind of lens technology that was developed by the military. And I was able to introduce that to companies in Japan and the US. And we began making these head-mounted displays like you see today, like the Oculus Rift and things like that. It required the design of very specific kinds of display technology, microelectronics, power consumption, all that stuff. And so today you can get these kinds of glasses. The cost of them has come down enormously. As I said, in the old days, a big camera and a big screen in front of you on your desk to magnify print cost $3,000. I think there weren't any really inexpensive ones that were less than $1,000. And yet today, the Oculus Rift, which has cameras, depth sensing, all these things, but again, it's a Facebook product. So these devices are a mere $300-400, which is still pretty prohibitive, but obviously it's come down quite a bit. And today there are about, oh goodness, I know of at least 10 companies working on augmented reality glasses. And I suggest to you that those devices will become a very effective way, as long as they've been designed and engineered well enough to have the right kind of brightness and engagement of your visual field to magnify and to assist in low vision, as they say. Low vision, what is that? Vision for vision impaired people, to enhance the picture, the contrast, the size, to accommodate and personalize it to your vision requirements. And I remember when I first was losing my eyesight, there was an organization that really insisted that blind people shouldn't try to be sighted people. They should really learn blind people ways, and they were very serious about it. And today they've changed quite a bit, and it's the National Federation of the Blind. They make very good products, And I highly recommend them as a national organization here in the US that you can visit their website, and you can also perhaps take advantage of the publications. I'm not sure how that works, but they have a lot of resources for people that are blind and visually impaired. And among them, they've been very supportive of technologies that can help with magnification and help with enhancing for people with vision. You say no? I'm talking to my beloved partner, Kay Aloha. She's been assisting me here this morning. See if we can get her to go on camera. She's kind of shy. Now she's punching me. All right. It's early here. We just had a big pink sunrise. It was all pink. It was really very lovely. Yes.
Oh, how can I join the communitarian network?
How can
Thank you, Mr. Fuller, for showing your feather.
okay.
Oh, they joined the communitarian network Instagram. Did you want to use the vocab word decentralized internet for the technology?
Kealoha reminds me that I should mention to you the idea of a decentralized.
You've been talking about it, but
I've been talking about
vocab.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Decentralized means instead of having a centralized server, or a centralized source, like any of the internet technologies tend to be, they're all from one centralized company like Microsoft or Facebook or Google or Apple. These are centralized, and that's where all the data in their network resides up in the clouds. It's like the cloud, essentially. Decentralized is where we pull the data out of the clouds. That is to say, instead of in the clouds, it's where we live, in our community, in our village. Decentralized, part of community life is decentralized. Everything doesn't go through the central authority of our government. And the internet doesn't reflect that. It's all pretty much centralized. Most all the services are centralized. There's some localization that's done in country, let's say like India. You get a different Google search than I do, that's for sure. There are many people that have something to say about how that works. But when it's in our own communities, we can be the arbiters, or the people who decide what to share with each other based on our needs, on our interests in our community. And so decentralized means instead of up in the clouds, it's here on earth with us in our community, in our village, amongst our family members, amongst our other community members who are blind or physically disabled or have various impairments. Helping each other is sort of the aim, and decentralized is the way to do it. It works better for us. Are any of you interested in careers in assistive technologies? Do I understand? Communications between blind and deaf people. Are you still connected?
Yes.
That's a good question. At one point, I was dating a young lady who was blind. I was deaf, sorry. And I, being blind, we were kind of a pair. Hey, she couldn't hear and I couldn't see. So how did we communicate? At the time, we passed notes. And then I found a device that when we were apart, I could send her messages via my telephone back and forth. In the early days, this was back in the late 70s or early 80s. And you had to dial in on your phone 2 buttons to make a or a B, and it was kind of ineffective. Today, is if you are familiar with Zoom and Zoom calls, we have a real-time transcription that is available. I don't know if we're captioning this call. I would hope that we do, because we certainly want to embrace our deaf community as well.
Yes, it's captioning. We have enabled.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, there you go. So real-time captioning is coming of age. It's still pretty poor, as we've all realized. Any of us who use screen readers or voice recognition systems, it's still pretty crude at this stage. It hasn't been a priority. You know, they've got us all chasing around on a little flat glass slab, you know, little icons and buttons. And so what they've done is they've then pasted on top of that the accessibility solution. So we're the victims of a rather badly designed user interface. And I do say that, I mean, Apple designed this user interface over 10 years ago. And well, it kind of reflects the time from when it came, icons and all of that. It is very poor for customization. Not an easy thing to work with at all. Very terrible. I tell you the truth, I use a lot of very colorful language, shall we say, when using my voice recognition system and the screen reader. It's a harsh way to try to use the computer to try to get information. And at the same time, this is improving. As I mentioned to you, our company, Touch.ai, is going to be working on this and looking at how to better improve how people communicate with each other. Yes. And with deaf people, it's really important to be inclusive in our design and to understand about deafness and deaf culture. And I found that the language skills were very different for people who are deaf, and their education was very different. And so in some ways, it required rethinking communications from the perspective of a hearing person to that of a deaf person. And so I just say in general, one of the most important technologies is kindness and sensitivity and support for people who are challenged with language skills and challenged with auditory or hearing or vision or mobility skills to be able to think from their side of the desk, to use our gift of human empathy to better connect and support each other. More questions?
I think maybe.
A very good morning to you, sir, and ma'am too. I'm Shivani speaking. So I've got two questions to you today. One is a quite challenging issue that I've been trying to tackle as I'm learning languages. So I use different applications to learn languages in which I keep on getting different images. So I'm not able to tackle that issue. So is there any solution that you can, we can get from it? And the second question is regarding the project that you have been working on. I heard this Fuller Visions project, and could you just brief on it a little? And it's nice talking to you, and it's a wonderful and beneficial session for all of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm honored by your words, and I thank you for them. Well, I'll start with Fuller Vision is a work in progress. Actually, I need some web design people. We're not doing a very good job on our web design yet. I work too much, too long, too often on other things, and but it's my personal passion, as we are sharing today, to share with others. It was the promise I made to myself when I was 19 and told I'd go blind, that perhaps there's some wisdom in it, you know, something I've learned from it. And I think it took me many years. I wasn't until I was into my 50s that I realized I'm kind of unique. I've had a unique life experience as a blind designer, artist, technologist. There aren't too many people that follow that path. And at the same time, a person who isn't about, you know, life isn't for me about money. It's really about helping and using this life that I have in a good way for the world and humanity, and to try to find a way to make that work. The challenge of our time is that there's a one-size-fits-all mentality. when people design buildings, when people design computers, when people design websites, things like that. If it works for them, they think it works for everyone. And they're not really being embracing of the idea that there's a diversity of possibilities of perception, of cognition, of use. And so imploring people to be more conscious or aware is kind of the mission I have now. I'm really very interested in enhancing awareness, our community awareness. If you think of it, all the problems of the world can be found in our own community. People that are in poverty, environmental pollution, practices that aren't helpful, that are harming water quality, all of these things are right in our village, our own community. And why is it that we haven't found a better way to bring people together to work on these challenges? And that goes for your first question, which is about working on languages and learning different languages and then getting different images for the same words, the same concepts. Very much the case that this is where AIs can come in and be very helpful. AIs are not really, quote unquote, intelligent. They are certainly an artificial means of processing knowledge or information. And when they're working well, they mimic our human abilities, but they do it in a dedicated way that would take us 100,000 years to do very quickly. And so with that in mind, I do believe, and I say this to everyone, the best is yet ahead for humanity. Soon, good technology should seem like magic. And that's a science fiction concept. I'm a big fan of science fiction that I really also believe in. And that is good ideas, good technology should seem like magic. You shouldn't have to really go to such trouble to find out information. It's like if you have a flat tire on your bicycle, you should be able to say, where's the nearest place to get a bicycle tire fixed? And boom, get an answer without having to wade through 8 pages of bicycle tire ads and everything else in between. It is the ability to more succinctly understand your issues in context and in the situation you find yourself. And that's one of the gifts that we humans have that the machines today are crudely not really following. And that's because the people who set them upon us are only looking at how they can sell us a bicycle tire. They don't really want to help us with our immediate problem unless they're made aware of it. And they're not aware of it. The machinery just simply does what it was programmed to do, which is push a whole bunch of bicycle tires at you when you don't really need a bicycle tire. You just need to go get some air and a little patch. So this is the world we live in today, where things are kind of misaligned, not particularly well suited to us, somewhat disabling. Again, a guy coming to a store that has stairs in a wheelchair is a guy with a disability. A guy in a wheelchair in a store that's been designed with accessibility is what we call a customer. So if I'm the merchant, I think I'd rather have that man as a customer than as a guy sitting outside of my store feeling unhappy. That's the better world. And that's how I look at this thing, is when we undertake this appropriately. I'll tell you another little thing. I want to add this real quickly. As a business person, as a filmmaker, and as a person who's been very able to work in the world of business and technology, I've always been shocked. I mean, literally shocked and appalled, horrified at how very poorly the market, the business community, the business culture of our time treats people with disabilities. They pretend we don't exist. The media is largely responsible. That is to say, when our motion pictures, television, music, everything, fail to embrace the truth of our human experience, that there's a cycle of life with aging and impairment, reducing our abilities, but it isn't something that we want to wall off and pretend doesn't exist. As I said, the man in the wheelchair outside or inside of the store is the difference. Why not embrace the truth of things? And that is, people come with different abilities and some have impairments. Why make that a problem? Why not embrace the customers? Like I said, it's nearly half the people in our society, because of course we all find ourselves aging. Oh, back to that long-term care, 35% of the dead here in the United States are people with disabilities. It's a shocker to me that people aren't kind of aware that that's family members, that's elders, that's people that we care about. How is it that we've overlooked that? And here's a really shocking statistic. Comes from the long-term care industry, the people that are responsible largely for the problem that caused the death of so many. That industry reports that over the age of 62, 63% of people, that was over the age of 65, 63% of the people will be at some point in their life in a long-term care facility, perhaps after surgery, only for a short time, but many of us for the remainder of our lives. 63%, it's like 43% women, 32% men. Oh my goodness, well, if only people knew this, they might be a little more concerned when they find out 35% of the people dying were in these facilities. And so there you go. Self-interest for humanity needs to embrace the whole human family and embrace our real potential, as opposed to focusing on our quote unquote disabilities and then discarding us for not being able to make the grade for their particular product or service or business. So, oh, lovely. Yes, let's all, anyone that has an interest in becoming a professional in developing assistive technology and working with assistive technologies should be aware of the IIAP, International, Association of Accessibility Professionals, IAAP, International Association of Accessibility Professionals. It's an organization that you can join. They do have some membership dues. I don't remember what they are. I have been a speaker at their conferences, and I knew the founders of that organization. And there's another organization called G3. I'll be sure to share those with the Venki, and perhaps Kealoha can put it up here in the chat window. But those are important organizations to know about. G3 puts on a M-enabled summit, M as in mobility, or mobile, sorry, M-enabled summit. And they do that every year. I think it's in Washington, DC, but I believe it's also in various other capital cities around the world. And there's another initiative that I'm a part of called Cities for All. Cities for All is part of the World Enabled Initiative for global and accessible smart cities. We started some 6-7 years ago a movement for accessible smart cities. And what it was is all the big tech companies, Microsoft, Apple, Google, all want to become part of the infrastructure of future cities. And their idea was, we can help make traffic move better. We can do these different things. But we brought to the table the challenge that is, how do you cross the digital divide? How do you engage all of your citizens? And that's a particular importance in an aging society. Here in the United States, we are entering a period where there will be more aging people than ever before in human history. Same is true in about 27 other countries. Japan is a notable example of a society that is aging very rapidly. China is aging very rapidly. Their one-child program ended up with lots of older people and not so many young people to fill in those positions. And so aging is a real problem in the world. And there was a study done in 2015 called the Global Aging Study, done by economists in 27 countries. And what they predicted is the world's going to face 27 tsunamis, meaning those big waves that are going to crash onto our societies, of aging people who need help and assistive technologies to better able themselves to be living good lives. And it isn't there. People aren't thinking of how to better accommodate people as they age and with end-of-life care, things like that. That's why 35% of the people who died here in the United States were in these long-term care facilities, nursing homes. And so we aren't, as a society, thinking smart. We're not thinking efficiently. And in the business community, as I call it, the business culture, has completely been ignorant on this subject. And they're only now starting to catch up. But here's a shock for you. In the United States, we have had the Black Lives Matter movement, primarily because of so many police shootings of people of African or Black people here in our country. And why is that? Actually, when you look at the statistics, half of the people killed by police here have been people with mental health disabilities. And so there you go. I've been on a radio show, someone asked me, should we defund the police? And I say, well, I can tell you that half of the people they kill happen to be people with disabilities. Why not take half of their money and let's avoid killing these people? Let's have some community support of some kind for them. So as we embrace the truth of our time, aging, disability is a real challenge and a real opportunity. It doesn't have to be a problem. It's only a problem if we ignore it and we fail to accommodate people. Then we create disability. Then we create 35% of the people dying as a result of their age or disability, or their impairment, I should say. So let's agree together that this generation here in this call with me, these many generations, are in a position to do something about that. Let's make the world better. And at the same time, be successful, because truth to be known, there's a lot of opportunity, good heavens, for making these things work better. It'll be better for everyone. When we think of the tools that we need when we're blind and visually impaired for, let's say, finding our way, they call that wayfinding, or navigating in our cities, which are very complicated and difficult quite often to do when you're blind. Well, that's the same problem a person riding a bicycle has. They can't be taking their eyes off of the road, their circumstance, or moving their hands from their controls to run a little black glass square with little pictures on it and try to figure out where they are. They need some means by which their natural human abilities are enhanced, using their voice, using their hearing, using their sensory human ability. And so that's where we're going to find opportunity, all of us, in thinking through the problems that we encounter and imagining how they could be better addressed and how that might work. And so I want to encourage each and every one of you interested in assistive technologies and the idea of enhancing human potential to think about that, to think about how your ideas, all the little things you encounter in everyday life, could be made more effective. I do it every day myself, of course, and 90% of it is I use an iPhone. I end up cussing, that's to say using profane language, quite a lot, because it really is terrible at helping me. It's a miserable experience, frankly. And I've been rather careful not to disrespect Apple as an important company with great design, but I'm really quite irritated that 10 years now using this miserable device, I find myself still locked out and frustrated by their inappropriate use of technology and their lack of embrace of my situation and lack of understanding of it. And as I say, it's not just me, it's bicycle riders, it's people driving automobiles. why can't we make it work in a more effective way for people who don't want to use their eyes for these miserable tasks? And likewise for any of the people that have physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities. My humanity is easily addressed, and my needs are easily understood, and my patterns are easily able to be accommodated by technology. I just don't want it to be done in an exploitive and inappropriate way, such as today these very poor tools are doing. And I do believe that we'll all have a much better future, and that the best is yet ahead for us as we use these tools and these technologies to enhance our quality of life and extend our human potential.
Oh, do you know about Bionic Eyes?
Yes.
Not available.
Oh, yes. I just got a question about Bionic Eyes. Yes. For about, gosh, since I was 20, I think, I've been involved with an organization called Foundation Fighting Blindness. They are a nonprofit group that funds research and development of technologies to address progressive vision loss through various vision impairments. And they pay for genetic research, they pay for electronic retinas, implantable devices, all of these ideas. I've been exposed to those now. I've served on fundraising boards with this organization. I've been around. I've attended their scientific conferences. I've met with their science leaders. And I can tell you this is an area where people are very diligently working. In the last week, I can tell you 4 or 5 people that knew me sent me an article about a new technology, optogenetics, where they've used algae, a protein peptide, I think it is from algae, that converts light into impulses that can be matched to the neurons in your eye. And so they were able to restore vision for a blind man. He has to wear special goggles that process the image and display it into his eyes in a particular frequency of light that activates this algal peptide, I think it is, and then it can restore vision to a limited degree. So that's one solution. I remember about 1994, I got contacted by a Dr. Rizzo, and he's at Johns Hopkins, MIT, and he was in Palo Alto, where I lived in California, at Stanford University to give a talk on electronic retinas. And my ophthalmologist at Stanford was the head of the Stanford program on electronic retinas, retinal implants, things like that. And he called me up to say, hey, I'm here in town to give a talk, and I'm in touch with you because you're not only one of the people that have this problem, but you're also someone researching in this field, which was true. I had S3D labs. I was working on head-mounted displays and image processing systems for vision impairment at that time. And I said to him, oh, how interesting, electronic retinas, eh? And then I said, my computer blows up at least once a week. And at the time they had a problem with the processors. And I said, and you're suggesting that we might put something into my head, you know, and having worked in consumer electronics, I'm not a real big fan of that idea. So he didn't think I was funny. I thought I was funny, but okay. Scientists can be like that sometimes. But I still to this day would say I'm not a real big fan of the idea of installing electronics in my head. I'll be honest with you. I'm a little bit, you know, I like nature. I like my nature. And I worked with technology now my entire life. And all I can say is I know 1,000 ways things can break, blow up, melt down, overheat, you know, etc. And the idea of installing it in my head just really puts me off quite a bit. I will say this, there are a lot of things in my life that are frustrating to me about being blind. It's somewhat inconvenient, shall we say, but at the same, and physical disabilities, same. But my essential humanity isn't dependent on my vision or my physical well-being. It's really my conscious awareness. And so I sort of hope to serve better the conscious awareness. What I need when I'm out in the built environment of the physical world and the moving about cities and so on, is I really need to connect to awareness about my surroundings. Context, location, and situational awareness are what I need. Giving me spatial coordinate geometries and giving me references that make sense. There's a lot of people right now working on funny devices that'll cue you up in an augmented reality sort of way, tell you using the camera what you can see around you. But those are kind of awful. You know, clearly they're not designed by someone who's blind, because no one walks down the sidewalk having every sign around them read to them, you know, every sign, you know, just jabbering away. That's not what I need. That's not what you need. That's not what any normal hominid life form human walking down a street needs. We need the specific information we need, which is the destination you have is 2 blocks ahead, continue forward to the next intersection, 350 meters. You know, we need things that give us the actionable intelligence when and where we need it in the form we need it in. And it's not something that people seemingly without an experience with vision loss or blindness seem to understand very well. And so the truth is, each and every one of us is a lifelong laboratory of experiment. As we have a disability, we are finding ourselves challenged. It's how we respond to those challenges that makes a difference. As one wonderful disabled public speaker I know puts it, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it. So Bionic Eyes, you know, there is a good program at Stanford. A gentleman named Dr. Chilchinsky is working on a bionic eye, an electronic eye that they could implant in your head. This is very possible. It won't happen very soon, but it is possible. And for those of us who have been blind for years, hard to say. If you were blind since childhood, probably not an option, you know, but our minds, our brains, our cognitive processing of knowledge and information is very adaptable. And it turns out that people that are blind also visualize the world around them in a very similar way to people who have sight. And so what we need to do is better understand our humanity and embrace that, as opposed to kind of imposing solutions from the outside that seem like they make sense. Like, wow, what you really need is an electronic eye. It's like, do I? I'm not sure about that. I really need information. I need to be able to do my job. I need to be able to navigate in the physical world. That's more of the problem than it is replacing a human sense with an electronic means. So that's my personal opinion. Not to say I don't work on these things or with the people that do, I do, but I'm just telling you my own personal bias is kind of recognizing and embracing my humanity where I find it, you know, as opposed to wanting to make it restored, I guess, you know, and that's just a difference of opinion, really, just sort of a personal modality. It took me many years to embrace the truth of my situation, and I would be one day blind. I didn't do it quickly. I don't want you to get the impression that I have some sort of super ability at that. It wasn't true. I worked with my eyesight as very long as I could, and I pushed it to the limits. And I would have gladly, at any point along there, been glad to have an electronic eye. Having said that, at the end of the experience where I find myself now, fully blind, I was fearful of being fully blind. And now that I am fully blind, I can say it's a bit inconvenient at times and in ways, but my life is complete and whole in most ways. And where it isn't being well accommodated to the world, it could be improved. And that doesn't necessarily, you know, mean that I have to go to the most extraordinary idea and wait for that to happen. I guess part of it was the early days when I was 19, which is many years ago. I'm 67 now. I was told that probably not in your lifetime. And I found that to be a pessimistic, non-optimistic way of looking at the challenge of blindness. My brother was very bitter about that. He thought they should have done more. He thought they should have gotten it done. He really felt frustrated. He was angry. I asked him to come with me to a scientific conference on retinal disorders and meet some of the scientists I was working with. And he was just as, I was shocked. He was saying, those guys aren't scientists. They're just taking money. And he was just terrible about it. He's a scientist himself, but he was decrying these people who were working on retinal research as having not made any progress, which seemed true because, you know, from the age of 19 to the age now of in my 60s, it didn't seem like a lot had changed, you know, but at the same time, science sometimes is slow. And he was right. There wasn't a lot of resources applied to this challenge. There weren't a lot of people looking at how to do it. It did take longer than it could have, would have, should have, or could have. It didn't have a lot of money in the research. There was enough to do some basic research and to get us along to this point, which has been pretty good. But I will tell you on the bionic eye subject before I complete, just to give you the update, there is work being done on this in the US. One of our largest budget expenditures is military. Why? Oh, who knows? I'm very much not someone thinking that's a brilliant idea. I kind of despise it, frankly. I hid under my desk when I was 10 years old, expecting to be vaporized in a nuclear war. And it made me angry as a child to think that I'm a member of a species that's so crazy they would blow the world up. And so to this very day, I'm angry that I come from a species that would spend money on things like that, you know. But having said that, DARPA, the Defense Authorization Research Projects Agency, DARPA, has a research program where they've been advancing research on human vision and augmenting it. So they have now paid for research, I think it's in North Carolina, where it's called optogenetics, the same thing that made the algae restore partial vision in a blind man, is being used to go to a little area in your occipital lobe where all the nerves from your eyes plug in, and they optogenetically change the neurons there to include photoreceptors and photoemitters using these kinds of algal and other genetic traits. They're able to switch on in those nerves the ability to receive light and to emit light. And so with it, they then put an optical connection to your brain by drilling a little hole in your head and interfacing with this region that they've enhanced for vision, for light in and out. And they're able to have a camera and a projector. The projector stimulates the neurons in that region, and it's able to actually, and this is what they've said, they're able to reproduce human vision fully by electronic means. And so you'd wear tiny micro cameras in your glasses. You'd have eye trackers that would follow where your eyes, non-functioning eyes, are pointing, and it would then amend the perception to match your eyes movement, projecting into your brain and this region of the brain, the stimulus that gives you the ability to see again, and then as your brain would be also the neurons there emitting light to be able to read that back as well. So the reason the military wants this, you can imagine, you know, hey, wouldn't it be better if we didn't have to like use a joystick to fly a plane or to fire a weapon or to see radar, things like that. So that's kind of how the military's looked at the problem, enhancing human perception to increase their, you know, performance envelope, let's say. And so that's a good deal of funding there. And there's other research along similar lines and in other ways that are kind of looking at funding these artificial vision systems. Yeah. Mhm.
Someone's hand raised.
Hand raised.
Or two people.
I could pretend like I see a hand there. Oh, there's a hand. We're looking at a question.
Hello.
Dr. Suresh.
Yeah. Hello, Fuller. Can you hear me?
I can, yes, very clearly.
Yeah. The first thing I would like to say is thank you for your wonderful and informative session.
I'm honored.
And yeah. And my question to you is the first thing I would like to know when I address in public or when I would like to know my facial expressions, like how I wave my hand, how I, smile at people, how I do. Is there anything to assist me with that? And second part of my question would be like, is there anything to assist us in classroom teaching? Like, if you are a sighted person, you can look at, you can have an eye of on each and every person of what they are doing and what's happening in the class and all. And is there anything to assist with it? And third part of my question would be like, can you throw a little bit light on the accessible travel on in country as well as outside our country, abroad travel, accessible travel?
Kealoha, to my left, is my producer, and she's a cinematographer, filmmaker. And she has advice for you on the emoting, that is to say, your facial expressions and so on. She would recommend some acting classes or dramatic coaching, and that makes sense to me. I think in general, for me, I'm highly conscious of my physical appearance, how I appear, how my facial expressions are being perceived. It's mostly because I've worked in television for many years and I've had cameras pointed at me. And when I could still see, I came to understand how I appear. And I think it kind of goes back to when I was 5 years old. Some other little kid told me I was funny looking. At the time, I was really hurt. I didn't know what to think. I went home and I made a decision to study myself in a mirror and to answer this question: am I funny looking, or what? And so I stood in front of this mirror for about 30 minutes. I could still see then very well. And I noticed that I really was having a hard time being objective about looking at my face. It also seemed like only pieces of my face were really the things I was seeing in real time. If I studied it, I kind of noticed that it wasn't the entire face at any moment, but little pieces of it, which turned out to be a truth about how vision actually works, which I was onto at 5, but I didn't have time for that. I had a question to answer. Am I funny looking, or maybe even possibly handsome? So I quickly thought through all of the actors and male models of our time that were thought to be handsome people. And I realized that not a single one of them had anything in common with the other. And at that point, I decided that the standards for male beauty did not really exist, that it was sort of a matter of individual choice or something I didn't understand. But I decided that I guess it was up to me. And at that moment, I decided I was handsome. And I always make a joke out of it and say, and I've been satisfied ever since. So truth is, knowing that and this is what really helped me when I started doing film and television work, being on camera, is like, wow, people aren't nearly as critical of me when they're looking at me on a screen. They're just hearing some guy talking. And in truth, they're paying attention to that information. They're seeing how serious I may be, something like that. But for the most part, my eyes are in the right place. I have symmetry, the ears are where they belong. They're not particularly oversized or too small, or, at the end of the day, it's all so subjective that it's not even worth thinking about. We're basically the same model humans, more or less. So there's that. And
You gesture with your hands.
I gesture with my hands a lot, frankly. I use that as a real good effector. I noticed when I was filming people in television that they're rather boring when they just sit there staring straight ahead and speaking. All you have is what we call a talking head. So I like to always remember there's a frame around where people are seeing me, even now as we sit before a screen. And I try to use my hands to be helpful in helping people understand what I'm about. So I suggest thinking about using your hands, get them into the frame, especially if you're on film, put things close in, and someone should mute their mic, I think. But what was the second question? Could you repeat your second question? Sorry? I forgot the second question.
I forgot it too.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm Suresh again. My second question was classroom teaching. Is there anything to assist me to have an eye on each other, like whether they're attentive to whether they're listening to me, what's happening with them?
That is a really good question. I think in the end it'll be more about embracing the fact that you may, and I'm just assuming you may be blind, and therefore you won't be able to see the class. And so you start off by, and this is what I always say to people, wasn't always a rocket scientist about things like blindness myself. I had to learn, and the only way you learn is by experience. And so I may be your first blind teacher, but I need your help. I ask your help humbly to assist me in being a better teacher. And so if you don't mind, I would really appreciate it if you would speak up. If you're falling behind, if you're not understanding, just go ahead and shout it out. Interact with me. This is a fully interactive class we have here. You may have all been disciplined not to speak in your class. Well, I'm a blind person. I can't see your hands. Please interact with me. So just make it part of your, and in fact, you'll be the more expert on it than I haven't been that much of a lecture class professor sort. I sort of have always worked on camera or in smaller, kind of settings, but or just doing public speaking. But indeed, I say, make it a common problem. Share the challenge. Make people think creatively, and you'll have done a service to each of those people. When I first was going blind, I'd show up with a white cane in a business meeting or something. And the funny part was people hear of me as a visionary because of some of the technologies and ideas I work on. And so then they'd be shocked because no one ever had any idea that I was blind. And I'm showing up with a white cane and, oh my God, we've hired a guy who's blind, to do this. So I could really appreciate their confusion and challenge. And so I'd always kind of make a joke out of it. People would say something like, invariably, if I started to explain to people that I was progressively losing my eyesight, that I used a white cane to help with mobility, to check my where I'm going. And when I would do that, people would invariably interrupt me, because here in the United States, for sure, people like a happy ending, like Disney. And they'll say, but I understand when you lose one sense, your others become better. Now I have Usher syndrome, which is type 3, which means my hearing's also failing a bit. And so I don't want to tell them the rest of my story. I don't want their pity or empathy. So I'll say to them, really, no, I've never heard that before. When they say, I understand your other senses become better when you become blind. I'll say, really? No, I've never heard that before. But now that you mention it, I smell much better. Everybody laughs, And now we know the blind guy's funny. We know that it's not a big problem anymore. We laugh nervously and we're past the moment. And so that's kind of how I do it. I find an effective way to kind of engage people in the fact that there's more to me. There's more to me than just being a blind guy. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of knowledge and experience that you might not get if you just assume that I'm a poor, helpless, pathetic, humble blind guy. And that's how life is, you don't underestimate people.
And you talk about, working other people's side of the desk and sort of getting a gestalt on people.
A business approach that I recommend in teaching, which I use in business a lot and other politics, things like that, is to work the other fellow's side of the desk, the other person's side of the desk, to think about how you appear before them, to have that conscious perception of yourself, as I do, how I'm looking based on what I've known I look like in the past. Recently, I've discovered my face has some lines I didn't know were there, which comes with age, I guess. And I haven't seen myself in a mirror for a good 10 years, I suspect. And so, but my conscious perception of myself stays pretty constant. And I feel like I'm still the same 18-year-old guy I always was. And and so when I'm talking to people, I kind of work their side of the desk. I imagine how I seem to them, standing before them, sitting before them, speaking before them. And I try to work with that. And it's a real skill of empathy, a skill that extends our human perception to that of another person. And it enhances communications enormously when you do that. But so I look for you sharing with me your expertise as you find new techniques in this area as a teacher, a professor, as a lecturer. I usually start off when I'm a speaker. I get up in front, I walk up to the podium, I've been introduced, and then I kind of make it look like I'm looking around and I go, wow, what a good looking crowd here today. Boom, everybody's laughing. They know the blind guy's funny. I start off with those kinds of approaches so that we don't try to, I think Apple in their marketing had a joke about Apple's marketing, and it's not a problem, it's a feature. And that's when Apple comes up with some crummy design for, I think it was called Random or something, or a little MP3 player that you couldn't control. It just played music, It's not a problem, it's a feature. They called it Random, I think, or something.
Random shuffle.
Random shuffle. Yeah. What? Who would want that? Why would you want that? But Apple is correct. It's not a problem. It's a feature. You take it from the place where you want to push it down and you don't want people to think much about your blindness or something. And you bring it right up front, make it entertaining and interesting, share a little bit of it. And then from there you move on. And now nobody's thinking about that anymore. We got that behind us. And now they're kind of, they're with you. You have the people with you, your audience, your class. And that's kind of how I do it. A little bit of the, as Kealoha suggests, dramatic coaching could be very helpful. Mm-hmm.
This is the last two parts of the question.
There was two parts to your question.
Or 4 parts?
4 parts, 3 parts.
3 parts, okay. Did we get them all?
Did we get them all, Doctor?
Did that answer your question?
Did that answer your question? Any other questions?
No, no, Fuller. I think we don't have any questions.
Actually, still 2 participants raised their hand. Let me take this as well.
Pardon?
2 participants raised their hands. Can you take it, Lata?
Yeah, we'll take.
Good evening, sir. Again, this is me, Shivani.
Shivani.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the one that asked you questions regarding languages. So why I asked you this question was I have been learning Spanish since 3 years. So yeah, so I have been looking for lots of reviews for how can a visually impaired person learn foreign languages, and at the same time using different applications made me feel a little uncomfortable because there in the reviews that I read, I come across like saying instead of looking for activities which has images or which you can work with images, we have to look alternative for that kind of activities. And when you want to learn a language at your own pace, this is not possible basically, and we are losing a lot of content from it. Looking at your answer and talking about AI, I strongly believe that it will definitely be resolved in the future. Thank you, sir.
Shivani, thank you. Actually, and the doctor, just before you asked a question I forgot about, I just remembered, and it is accessible tourism and travel, which does bear on languages, of course. And images should have narrative captions. It's a requirement now here in the US for sure. And people are terrible at it. They never do it. I can't tell you how many apps I touched it. Button, 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 or image, image, image. You know, nice. Remember me, guys. They don't. So that's really very, very, very frustrating. And I'm stuck when I'm in that spot. Where do I go from there? I don't have that knowledge. Fortunately, I have a lovely assistant who can, who's herself a visual artist, who can, reproduce for me the concept of what the image was. I think that kind of narrative captioning could be a really good thing as an exercise as you study languages. The ability to describe an image and use an image would be something that would be the real challenge on the language. So yes, that seems like a very important part of studying languages, is to have precision in your languaging about images. And so that's an area where I think perhaps it's not a problem, it's a feature. If you think of it, perhaps your experience with this reveals to you the necessity of better language instruction by providing narrative captioning so as to help polish the languaging skills that people are studying by understanding what it takes to describe images adequately. And so from that standpoint, perhaps there's, and this is the way I think, I'm a business kind of oriented person, and primarily because there's no quicker way to change the world than using the market. That is to say, people willing to pay to make the changes. And you can do things through nonprofits, you can do things through government. It takes a lot longer, often, not always, but yes. Whereas if you can get people to realize there's an advantage, there's a better way when they do it in an improved way, such as we're speaking of, it creates opportunity. So perhaps, Shivani, there's an opportunity to create better language instruction materials with narrative captioning. Certainly you'd have the market for anybody that's vision impaired and blind studying languages, but you might also find that it becomes the vogue, the standard by which other language instruction courses are judged to be effective. And so I highly recommend, follow your muse, as it were. If this is something you see as a problem, perhaps you could fix it. And if you fix it, perhaps it'll change the world in a good way. So that's one of the suggestions I have. And then let me address accessible tourism and travel. This is an area where I saw a market opportunity for real. I live in Hawaii most of the time. I'm here in the United States mainland now on business largely. But in Hawaii, we are these islands, the furthest point on Earth from anywhere else. And in these islands, we have tourists from many countries arriving constantly. The funny thing is, our government there has this travel and tourism bureau, and they fund hula dancers to go to Taiwan, in Indonesia, cooking classes. They do what they can to promote Hawaii to people in other countries as being a wonderful travel and tourism destination. And yet, I mentioned 27 countries like ours are in trouble because we have aging populations that we're not addressing. We're not reaching to those people in our businesses. So in those other countries, it's even worse than the United States. Like Japan is kind of horrible. if you have mobility impairments, the train stations, everything. Nobody's thought of how to make them accessible particularly. So it's getting better. They do a lot of good things in Japan. Please don't misunderstand. But at the same time, you've got a problem if you're aging and your physical mobility is impaired. And yet these are like huge tourism groups in Hawaii. Japanese people, #1 tourist. Same for Chinese people. The thing of it is, though, as people age, they do encounter impairments. And in my discussion with the Travel and Tourism Bureau in Hawaii, they revealed that they have people aging out of travel and tourism. They have people that have been coming for years, and now they're aging out. Now, what's interesting is people who are aging are people who usually pay for weddings. They're usually the ones who pay for graduations and things like that. They are the most well-financed people, perhaps often. And yet we allow them to slip away from us. And yet here's the funny part of it. In the United States, we've created a rather acceptable level of accessibility. Trains, buses, airplanes, airports, public government facilities, businesses are all required to be accessible. And here's the shocker. And this is why I refer to this in a shocking way. It's a cultural bias that exists stigmatizing people with disabilities. And you know it's true because no one ever advertises to people with disabilities in those other countries or in our own country. Come to Hawaii. We're fully accessible. Our buses from the airport are wheelchair equipped. They enunciate. They have things on the buses that say, you know, Alamo on a mall. The elevators enunciate. The curbs have cuts. And so what if we could use the spatial web that I spoke of, augmented reality, so that when people travel and are tourists, they encounter knowledge about the places that they're visiting. And they could have it in Portuguese, they could have it in Hindi, they could have it in Japanese, they could have it in Spanish, based on their personal need. And the same information transliterated sometimes by machines, sometimes by actual narration recorded. And then they could experience the music, the art, the artifacts in the physical world where they're traveling, where they belong. So that I look out over a scene before me. I see how it looked in 1929. I see how it looks today. I hear a story told by a local storyteller about that place. I listen to music somebody wrote about it. What a better world it is when we can break out of the museums, those artifacts, and put them out in the physical world in models, three-dimensional models that you could encounter, you could experience, you could touch and interact with using these new technologies. And so for me, accessible tourism and travel is the real driver for making full inclusion. That means for everybody in our world. And that to me is a very, very high goal that I want to support in every way possible. Accessible travel and tourism means for everybody. It's fully inclusive. We don't have to say we're doing it for people with disabilities. We can just say we're doing it for everyone. Again, to that specification on human beings. You know, it's from aging to birth. We have different abilities. And if we're able to better manage the communications effectively for those groups of people who may have challenges for sight or hearing or physical mobility, we're covering everybody. And that's the thing of it. So being short-sighted, shall we say, is the worst kind of disability. And that's kind of what our business culture suffers from largely today.
Sir, talking about the captions, even it's the same problem in certain websites. Let's say when you want to, I mean, sometimes we are supposed to be verified whether we are robots or humans. So at that time, sometimes captions are.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hate that. Hey, you know, all I do is K-aloha, K-aloha.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I go, hey, I can't use this miserable thing. I hate that. And then the audio cues. Hey, see, you have to remember this stuff. It's so hard to do. What a miserable thing that is. Yeah. Well, and again, that's because the web, the way it's designed, is one size fits all, and it isn't well considered in any sense for people that are challenged by vision or sight when using these websites, and their audio cues are awful. And so there's a better way of doing things, and that's the stuff we're working on. Planned systems creates a peer-to-peer encrypted and secure communications. So just as in today, each and every one of us joining this call has agreed to be on this call, is part of this community, this group that's on the call. Well, do we really need to go through a central server? No, we don't. Each and every one of us has a device that's equipped with the ability to create a video conference. And if we use the plan approach, we just directly connect to each other through an encrypted channel. And no one can jump in there and give us dirty pictures or anything. It's not available to anyone else. It's not up in the cloud. It's not running through our browsers. It's private, secure, and then we're in communication. And it's me. There's no one else but me at this end, through that technology. So privacy and security are the challenge. And certainly the CAPTCHAs are meant to be some additional layer of proof of your humanity instead of a machine. But there's other ways to do that. And 90% of it is, quit trying to make a profit by taking all of our information away from us and giving it to anyone so that we have to then, determine whether or not you're a real human. That's just a kind of an awful way to do things, frankly. There's better ways. There got to be better ways. I hate that too.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for your answers. And these are needed to be solved.
Yeah, at this point, we're what we call a support group. We're here to help each other.
Yeah.
Hold hands and say, "I'm sorry."
For language, I would suggest finding another human being to practice with on the phone or Zoom or Fiverr.
For language,
She wants to learn a language.
Kealoha uses.
She wants to learn Spanish. So
Spanish.
There are people on Fiverr starting at $5. I don't know if that's
there are ways to connect to people to practice language who are native speakers. There are several companies that offer that kind of service, and she was suggesting.
Yes, sir. Yes, there are few services. For instance, Busuu, BUSUU, which I used. But even then, it is mixture of, you will learn a sort of vocabulary and grammar along with practicing, with the native speakers, the language that you want to learn. So,
yes.
Yeah, even then we are losing content.
Kealoha's been working with Duolingo, was it, or something? And
yeah, even in Duolingo, I saw like that. We have to see the image and, match it or pair it up with
yes.
the object. Yeah,
they're getting a few more audio options.
Yeah. But Duolingo is not that accessible actually. It gives graphical representation for each and every vocabulary.
Yes.
They're doing a few more audio things like French and Spanish.
They're doing more audio things with French and Spanish.
But I'm not sure how. I haven't tried it on inaccessibility mode.
We haven't tried it in accessibility mode. One thing I run into a lot is my accessibility features using VoiceOver on my iPhone means that I can't activate buttons. I can't fill in.
And the problem is the Android application is quite different than iOS.
Quite different
so
than
there
iOS.
is some accessibility issues as well on Android application.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's all such junk, frankly. These are yet the early days.
Hello, sir. Very good evening.
There's one more person who wants to.
Can you hear me, sir?
Question. Yes, Sundar has a question.
Sundar.
Yeah. Very good evening. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, my brother. I'm waking up finally. It's early over here.
Okay. So hope you are you are doing work from home and you are safe.
Yes. Very lovely here. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have got two questions regarding this. So we would like to know that how much was your self-learning and how much the institute helped you to reach to this height? That is the first question. And the second question is, do you have any plan to start a training center in India? And do you know any Indian who is working in this augmented reality and or along with you in the company?
Repeat that.
Could you repeat the first part of your question? It sort of got a little garbled.
Yeah, the first part of the question is that how much was your self-learning, and how much the institute or where you have studied, how useful it was, or the percentage your self-learning and the knowledge you got from the institute where you have studied regarding this designing.
Something.
How much was?
Can I answer like Fuller? So he's asking that how much the institutes are contributed in your learning. Is your institute contributed more than that your self-learning? Is his question.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, I'm going to confess to something here, and that is I'm a bit on the what they call the autistic spectrum. I suspect if I'd stayed as a visual artist, I probably would never have learned or developed any skills for being personable, a communicator. To be honest with you, my mother said to me a few years before she died, I can't help but think what you and your brother might have accomplished if you hadn't been blind. And when she said that to me, I had a quick answer. I go, oh, that's easy, Mom. Well, first of all, I always thought my brother and I were quite accomplished, but that's my opinion. Mom was always pushing. And I said, oh, that's easy, Mom. I figured that out years ago. It goes like this. I came back from art and design school in Europe. I got a job in an advertising agency in California. I became quite good at it. And I bought a beautiful home on a cliff and a fast car. One night I went to a party and I drank too much Courvoisier, fine brandy or something. I went off a cliff. I've been dead 22 years, And my mom goes, I go, well, there were some good things about me and there were some not good things about me. And in truth, my experience with blindness, I credit with my sensitivity, my empathy, my knowledge, my skill, my humility. I think being humble is probably, I know in many cultures, it's one of the things that opens us to possibility, to ideas. And so for me, I wasn't really good in academia. I was good when it was designing art or artist things, but when they tried to teach me algebra and things like this, my brother was a math whiz, my father was an aerospace engineer. My mom was a federal accountant, so everybody's real good at math. Me, I'm good at general math, but I hated algebra. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. It was the way it was being taught, of course. So the truth is, I found myself rather thwarted and frustrated in education. I can't sit in a classroom and stare at the front of the class with a chalkboard. I couldn't even see it. I didn't even actually know that, when I was younger, that my vision was failing. I didn't know that. But it was hard to see the chalkboard. And the lectures would just put me to sleep. And I remember teachers would write on my report cards, he keeps looking out the windows. He's a dreamer. Yeah. So truth is, I'm a bit of an odd person in the sense that I've been sort of self-educated as much as anything. I for years, I felt inadequate because of that. Even though I became a consumer electronics executive, a Wall Street company and everything, even though I had many accomplishments, served on boards of directors, I thought sooner or later people are going to notice that I'm a blind guy, and they're going to say, and he doesn't even have a business degree. Who let him in here? And that's called imposter syndrome. A lot of people suffer from it. You think you're not good enough. You think you don't measure up by your own estimate. And it took me years to get over that, quite frankly. And I recommend don't even think about it that way. Change your way of thinking. Don't look for other people to acknowledge and accredit you. A college degree is a wonderful thing, and I totally encourage people to pursue degrees. It's very helpful in life. but at the same time, for what? What are you going to do with your life? How many people really get degrees in things that you're interested in? Or what does the degree contribute to what you're doing? I was studying journalism, public relations, diplomacy at the university when I finally decided, after probably about, I don't know, 17 years total school from zero to like 17 years into it. I remember thinking, I really don't need this. I'm a graphic designer trained in Europe. I have a good sense of aesthetics and design. Public relations, writing is such an individualistic thing. How you speak, the tone. I'm a great, I love literature and reading. And so I just felt I didn't really need much more there. And to be honest with you, everything else ever since then has been self-taught. I came to find myself open to the possibility that I could learn, I could do things that I wanted to do. And I was driven by my ambition to make a difference in a positive way, to take lemons and make lemonade, as they say, out of the challenge of blindness. What can I learn from it? What could I do with it? So after I was successful as an electronics executive working on consumer electronics, I took the money and knowledge I had and I started working on products for people with disabilities. And it was my first really important lesson in life that the business community, who I needed to invest in the technologies I was working on, wanted nothing to do with it. Even though I had had many successes, people were interested in hearing me to find out what my new business prospect would be. But when I tell them I was working on consumer products for people with disabilities, they kind of like throw me out of their office almost. I mean, to tell you the truth, they'd say, "Oh, those people have no money." Well, that's not true. I'd try to say, well, let me tell you what our market research has revealed, and then you can share with me what you know. A little bit insulting there, Gordon. Oh, well. But at the end of the day, I didn't get anywhere with that. It was terrible. It was like 1990, early 90s. And people never thought that people with disabilities were anything but poor and disadvantaged people. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, obviously. And so I had to change from doing what I wanted to do to finding a way to take what I'd learned and had developed and turn it into something that could be successful. And that's how I became a virtual reality 3D movie guy, is the technology I'd been working on to help people with vision impairment and people with physical disabilities, this augmented reality, virtual reality stuff. I found that the people working in virtual reality didn't know any of the things I knew, didn't know how to build things, didn't know where to get parts, didn't know how to program it. And I'd hired a lot of young people working with me at that time. And I took over and started doing better than any of the companies that were doing it professionally at the time. And that's kind of how it went for me. It's like, I got, when you get lemons, you make lemonade. I made virtual reality and 3D movies something of a success for myself. And then from there, I began to find other areas where my knowledge and expertise could be used, but there was not a lot of people interested in solving problems for people with disability, not at all. And so a good portion of my education came from hitting my head against the wall. It came from striving to do something more than just what everyone believes is possible. And at the end, at this point, yes, I think of myself with some small measure of pride that I'm a survivor. And not only that, I have expertise that very few people do. And so I'm proud of that. I know how hard it was to get that. And I'm in a world now, post-COVID, where everybody's going to start trying to figure out how can we better serve humanity in a better way. And we have new tools, new technologies. The things I was working on long ago are now much more commonplace, much more inexpensive. Other people are fixing the problems that those things had. And I don't have to do that part. All I need to do is be aware that there's a huge untapped market, a lucrative, rich market for assistive technology and for embracing the truth of aging and disabled and children, that we all need a little different approach sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, elaborate explanation.
what it is. Well, thank you. Yeah, universal design, as it's called, is a really good thing. The idea, I like to think of inclusive, because all these words sort of get used in political senses. And so if you approach a company today and you say, I'm here to help with accessibility, they're going to go, oh, one of those disabled people, you know, and there you go. And they have human relations and legal department to work with you. You know, they have a quota to fill or something. You know? So they're not a lot of fun to deal with. But if you say inclusive design, they go, well, what is that? You know, you're, well, I'm trying to make a product that everyone can use. I'm trying to find a way that we get all the customers into the box. And then they like that story. That works pretty good. But I'll tell you the truth, we're far from that point in time yet. Right now, because of the Black Lives Matters movement, our country here has been sensitized to the underserved, unserved needs of society. And it's become much more politically central. If you go to Silicon Valley companies now, any of them, Apple, Google, all of those companies, Facebook, you'll see on their website, they speak of supporting, very much so, diversity and inclusion. It's a new idea with them. They put it all up there. Even the people that rate businesses are starting to rate them based on their diversity and inclusion. And so even the first-rate kind of think tank organizations like Buckminster Fuller Foundation and Singularity University, the people that are kind of abstract out there, visionary thinkers, when you go to their websites, you'll see they're saying they support diversity and inclusion. So then open it up and look at the list. There it is. They have Black, Hispanic, Asian, women, LGBTQIA, and oh, we didn't make the list? Really? 1 in 5 people have a disability of some kind? Come on, and we're not on the list? Really? Oh, that's terrible. How is that possible? And yet, that's how it is. So that's the world I live in. They're still slow on the draw. We only have a 20% employment rate for people with disabilities. Now, I don't want to discourage anyone by saying that. In a country like the United States, which is somewhat known for being supportive and embracing of like accessibility and inclusion and diversity and all of that, I'm telling you the truth of our times, which is not quite yet.
Yeah, and I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah, long way to go. And I'm so glad there's a younger generation coming behind me to fill in the blanks. We're going to get it done, and it'll be great. And humanity will be better for it. Think about the challenge that disability puts into a human life, or impairment does, and think about the human potential that arises from that. I can tell you, having filmed over 1,500 interviews with people with disabilities with my colleagues, when we review those testimonies of these leaders, these are leaders also of the US disability rights movement, people that were strong advocates. When we review those, what you really come away with is a sense of human potential, of human spirit, the indomitable, good word, nature of humanity. We're amazing, flexible, and adaptable creatures. And no one's better at it than us. I mean, people that have been challenged. We find ways to work around the challenge. If we're open to making change, we can do it. And so I like to, when I saw that most of the companies now have diversity and inclusion, but not people with disabilities, I thought about it a moment and I said, I guess that's kind of okay in the sense that every one of those groups, Black, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQIA, all of them, we have members. Yes, we're part of each of those groups, Black, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQIA, women. It's normal.
My second part of my question was, apart from the hospitality or the humanitarian work which you are doing, do you have any plan to have a center or a training center to be started going forward?
I think we should all work together on that together as a group. And I do know there are people in India. I was in touch with a group that was working on travel.
Sundar will work on that, in coming days.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm working with you guys. Let's do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fuller. It was really great insight when people are really amazed, listening to your technical stuff, which is really new to most of us. We are thrilled to listen all of this, and really, glad to have you on board. And so, like, we left with very few people, and I think no one has a question. So, guys, can you unmute your videos if you could? So, I want to have a photo. Is that okay with you, Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sir?
Yep.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yes.
Yes, please ask.
Sir, I am Lata, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, I am very happy and blessed to speak with an eminent person who is working for the visually impaired and disabled ones. What is the problem? What I want to highlight and I want to have a suggestion from your side is the smartphones support so many applications for reading printed materials. But the application fails to read the manuscripts correctly. Can you suggest me any applications that supports reading manuscripts, sir?
Well, the one that when it's are you speaking of like optical image, like PDFs that are an image as opposed to textual materials like web content? Are you speaking of specifically image materials?
Sir, exam papers and all, when the teachers, we find we have to correct papers and all, manuscripts.
Oh, yes. Okay.
We have to go through manuscripts. So in that case, the applications, what that is currently we are using through smartphones, so it doesn't correctly reads the manuscripts, sir. We find it trouble in reading the manuscripts, sir.
Understood. Okay. There's one that I use. It's called KNFB. Maybe KLO will put it into the chat box. KNFB Reader. It comes from the National Federation of the Blind out of here in the US and international. And the KNFB Reader, it was very expensive when it first came out. It was like $39, which is when I bought it. And it takes a snap, you use your camera, excuse me, it tells you how to adjust the camera, and then it takes a picture. It takes a picture, and then it yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's not perfect. It works well, but it's very difficult, optical character recognition. What's good about the KNFB reader is it sort of helps you position the camera, because I can't see it all. It says the left corner, right corner, 40 degrees, 20 degrees. And it's like, whoa, you're really working hard at it, but you can do it.
We have like some suggestions for this. I can't sure about their accuracy, but there are applications to do stuff. So man-written script, you can read this Kaibo and Envision AI, but I'm not sure. I can't give you that 100% accuracy on that. But we can supplement with those applications as well on Android.
Sir, Kibo, I have attempted using Kibo, sir. It is also not giving 100% correct results, sir.
Yeah. So we don't have any application to get 100% accuracy, but we have to adjust with the Kibo, or else this Envision AI also works good. I heard.
Yeah.
Sir, I have tried with Envision, Kibo, and Sulaiman, 3 applications.
Yeah, but there is an issue. We can't even I don't have solution with the 100% accuracy with man written notes or documents.
Okay,
still that's developments are going on, and let's hope for the best.
Okay, sir.
Or we'll find a solution if we join together.
It is.
That makes sense?
it is very difficult to use these tools. There's no question about it. It's very difficult.
Yep.
And they're not easy to use. They're not comfortable to use. They're horrible to use, really. I'm hoping that in the very near future, they'll improve considerably using AI, neural networks, and perhaps they can be incorporated into our inexpensive glasses ultimately. And at this point, we're not there yet. It's a really hard thing to do. Ray Kurzweil, who is famous for his music synthesizer, and then he developed a system for scanning documents and converting it into text. The Kurzweil system was the one that they have installed in libraries here. I've been told that in the libraries, it's just everyday students that are using these systems to scan documents because, after all, they also need them to be more accessible so that they can copy and paste text and references and things like that. So it's not just our problem. Everyone's kind of confronted with this challenge. And the truth is, I hope we can move quickly past the age where we're using paper and print and come up with more flexible, more useful things. But this is one of the very difficult areas, as is transportation quite often, trying to move about. One of the sadnesses that I know is that people that are blind or visually impaired in this country, a majority of them don't ever go out in public if they can avoid it. You know, most people, I always say this about quote unquote people with disabilities. If I'm in a crowded meeting, I say, who here has a disability? Why, very few people want to raise their hand. They might have hearing problems, a bad hip. They don't want to identify themselves as a member of some stigmatized group of society. Sure, I can relate to that. At the same time, that's a problem because if we are all inconvenienced so terribly and we're silent about it, nothing gets better. And so I personally consider just about every week at least one or two companies, because here in the United States, if people don't make websites or information or forms accessible, you can sue them. You can sue them. You can find a lawyer that'll take the case. And sometimes you can create a class action against the companies because the law says you have to be accessible. In truth and in practice, very few people are fully accessible. They don't really understand how to do it, which from one side of the desk is a good thing because it means we have jobs for us. You know, industry needs our time, our talents, our knowledge, and we should be prepared to lend that knowledge and that talent to make the world better. But at this point, it's the early days for a lot of these things, even though we've been at it 30, 40 years, and it's still quite crude. I'm sorry to say that's one of the areas. Print documents just are very difficult. I have a lot of trouble with them too. Yeah. Well, shall we say namaste and aloha from our end here, and say good evening to you guys. It's getting late there. And,
yeah, good evening, good morning to you, and happy weekend. And before that, like, shall we have a photo? Please, Loha, could you help us?
Yes, Venkatesh, you can.
Oh, I think everybody's
Hello?
taking.
hello. We'll
Everyone's taking their video.
Yep.
on.
There's all of our lovely friends. Hello.
Can someone take a photo? Loha, could you help in that?
Kayla is making a screen capture here.
Pardon?
Kealoha is going to take a picture.
Okay.
Okay.
Gonna mute it.
Let me try to. Oh, yeah, Mahesh. Yeah. So I have taken. So it's the end of the session. Thank you guys for joining with us, and so I'll call Mr. Ganesh Reddy to end the session. Yeah, Ganesh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Venkatesh, and all the members. Sir, first of all, actually, this weekend, even we wake up in the early morning and by sitting around more than very near to 3 hours of time. And but the session is very useful, informative, and the area in which you are is very exciting and very interesting field and very nearest field to most of the visually impaired, because augmented reality, virtual reality is very exciting to our people to experience the technology, and the way you are contributing in the different ways is very those are cannot be expressed in the words. In the same way, participants, you also actually participated in the sharing and participating here by staying around 2.5 hours, and few people also waited in the queue to ask the queries. And sir, you also explained them very clearly by taking the time to make them understand clearly. And hope everyone has enjoyed this session, and we can meet you in the next session. If anybody missed the session or as a part of session, they can watch in our DPW YouTube channel. And for more updates, they can follow us at FB at dpw.org, Twitter, and Insta with the same user. However, if they want to give us any feedback, they can drop us mail connect@dpw.org. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
We're done.